Peace to you, family. So in this video, I want to discuss why I no longer use the Hebrew name when I'm referring to the Creator and how that came from a shift in my God concept. So we know that in the Hebrew scriptures, the word Lord in all caps represents the Tetragrammaton, the YHWH. Some pronounce it Yahweh. Others, like I have for many years, pronounce it Yahuah or Yahuah. And so I'm using Yahweh more frequently because it's more commonly known to people, but either pronunciation, this is the name used throughout the Hebrew scriptures. So according to the biblical narrative, this is the name given to Moses by God to give to the Israelites. It became the covenant name through which Israel would know and would remember and would relate to their God. So I have come to a place where I believe that Yahweh represents the Hebrew people's experience and perception of the Creator. I believe that the Hebrews were one people group who experienced the Creator and documented those experiences through their history, through their stories, through their writings. And like every other group of people, they experienced the Creator through the lens of their own culture, their own worldview, their own historical context. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it is limited. It's one lens through which the Creator is understood. So for me, there's now a distinction between when I'm speaking about Yahweh and when I'm speaking about the Creator. So when I say Yahweh, I'm referring specifically to the God portrayed in the Hebrew scriptures through the experience and perception of the Hebrew people. When I say the Creator or source or divine intelligence, I'm referring to the source of all existence, which is greater than any one people's experience, perception, or understanding. One of the things that has stood out to me was Genesis chapter 1, when it lays out creation. The Creator is simply referred to as Elohim, which we translate as God. And that distinction has become more and more significant to me because I've come to relate to the Creator beyond the Hebrew lens. I do not personally resonate with every way that the Hebrew God is characterized within the Hebrew scriptures through Yahweh. Part of the things that I don't resonate with come from what's actually written and intended within the text. But some of it comes from how, things have been translated. Some of it comes from all of the years of the reinterpretation that we now read into the text that's not actually there, but that we read into it as a culture. So when I say Yahweh, I'm speaking specifically about the Hebrew experience and perception of God presented in the scriptures. And I no longer see Yahweh as the full expression of who the Creator is. So when I'm speaking about the Creator, that's no longer the name that I use. So I still respect those Hebrew names, just like I respect all names that different cultures use to relate to God. I'm not opposed to the names at all, but this is the reason I now make that distinction. And about a year and a half ago, I had an experience that really solidified this distinction for me. So I was going through what I sometimes describe as a dark night of the soul. I was in the middle of involuntarily deconstructing. I was wrestling with my faith and with just living. And I'm a person who tends to understand things through imagery. I see and experience things in pictures and through metaphors. So during that time, the imagery that I saw was myself like a child in a car strapped into a car seat. Okay, and the car seat represented my understanding of Yahweh. It represented the religious framework that had held me and secured me for years. And I reached a point where within myself, I was saying that I can't do this anymore. I have to go. Let me loose from this. And I wasn't trying to leave the Creator. I was trying to leave what had become toxic to me and how I was experiencing the biblical faith in Yahuah had become toxic. So in this image, I unbuckled the straps, I climbed out of the car seat, and I jumped. And as a small child who doesn't know any better might expect, I thought I was going to land on the pavement outside the car. Okay. I thought I was jumping out of the car seat and landing out in the streets, but of course that's not reality. Okay. I landed inside the car. I jumped out of the car seat and I thought that the car seat was all there was that was holding me. The car seat had held me secure for a season, but it's the car itself that had been carrying me all along. It's the car itself that had been carrying me all along. For me, the biblical worldview and my understanding of Yahuah had been like that car seat. It protected me, it served a purpose. But when I stepped beyond it, thinking that it was God and that now I must be leaving God, but I actually landed in the greater reality that had been holding me all along. I landed in God, unfiltered, in Elohim, in Source, the bigger reality, the greater picture, the bigger truth. And I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but that moment changed my life. Because for the first time, I felt completely secure. During that season, I had spent months going to the park almost every day, walking in circles, literally wrestling with my life and with everything I believed. And honestly, I felt like I was kind of losing my mind. And one of those days, I was sitting in my car looking up at the sky, and this was the imagery that came to me, what I just explained. So I realized that what I had been wrestling with was a human perception of God, a human perception. That perception, it had meaning, it had value, but it was still just a human perception. The creator, the source of all existence, is not man. And we say that all the time, but I don't think I truly understood fully what that meant until that moment. Because we have projected man-like characteristics onto God. But now, for the first time, I experienced what I can only describe as solid ground. We've always said that he's a solid rock, but it's never quite felt like it felt in that moment. Those solid rock experiences were more like mountains, which are solid, but you have to cling to a mountain. I had to cling to him in fear still. I had to hold on tight so that I wouldn't fall. That was a different feeling and a different experience. But this right here, this solid ground. I recently heard the phrase that was relating to the source as the ground of being or the ground of existence. And when I heard those words, it resonated deeply with me in what I had just experienced, because I felt like I had landed on a solid, unmovable ground, the very ground of existence itself. And that experience erased so much of my fear. It ended my struggling to feel loved by God. And I realized that the creator is not unstable like man. That source is not the personality that man has created after his own image and then called it God. And through this experience, I finally felt safe. There was a spaciousness, there was a freedom, there was a stability. So that's why today, when I say God, when I say source, when I say the creator, when I say divine intelligence or divine nature, I'm making a distinction from the personality of Yahweh as he's portrayed in the scriptures and what I experienced as the ground of being, that solid ground. Not because I believe that the Hebrew scriptures have no value, because I don't believe that. I believe that they contain genuine encounters with the divine, but they're still one people's experience from the lens of man. And I think that we've taken that one lens and made it universal. We've made it the whole when it was never sufficient to carry that weight. So this video explained why I make the distinction that I now make. I hope that it made sense. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And in the next video, I'll share more about this shift in my God concept from a different angle. All right. Shalom to you.